Okay, so it's an honor and pleasure to moderate this panel since it's a very exciting moment to talk about the blockchain and the social good. So why is it exciting? We are, I think, in the middle or in the verge of a real revolution, what is normally referred to a paradigm shift, in the sense that we are seeing a lot of, and currently we are assisting to a lot of tension between the control and freedom, transparency and obscurities, or elites and minorities. And all of these tensions are based on the management of what is the biggest asset ever of humanity, which is information. The information created by the data produced through economics, politics, culture. And so we have assisted to several ways to organize information during centuries. The most recent one and the most transformative has been the internet. But now we are seeing, especially also looking at what is happening in the US, okay, the big father or brother or mother of the internet, where the access or the management and access to information through the internet is being regulated. So it's being controlled. The FCC has approved the law which is controlling, let's say, access to information, to some extent limiting the neutrality of the net. So probably now with the blockchain we have another chance, and we shouldn't probably waste it, and we should make good use of it, to give good access and manage to the information, especially to address what is referred to as social good. So the blockchain is apparently promising to be a solution, architectural solution, to organize in a shared, trusted way access to this information. So it will be interesting to hear from our professors and experts in the blockchain what is all this about, so figuring out what the blockchain really is, and what are the applications which already today could benefit and become more efficient and effective if based on this kind of infrastructure, as long also to understand how or what are the challenges connected to this infrastructure. So I would like, after this warm-up, to take off. So I would invite on stage Professor Guido Boella from the Department of Computer Science at the University of Turin, who will introduce us to the blockchain. Please.
Okay. Thanks to everyone. In the last 2 years, University of Torino has been working on blockchain, but specifically on the topic of blockchains for the social good. For these reasons, we created a large interdisciplinary group, not only of computer scientists with competencies on AI, big data and so on, but also lawyers, different kind of lawyers, from an expert of commons to tax law to privacy law, sociologists of the new economy, but also people from, let's say, the ground, from the real experience in commoning. And if you can put the slide. On, please, okay. So we created this University of Torino Blockchain Initiative group. So we are here, we are a lot of people, also probably in another room or in streaming, because in the last 2 years, blockchain has become hype. It's something very difficult to understand. As Leonardo suggested, it will be like the next internet revolution. It will be commonplace. I will not give you any technical explanation. Andrea will do in the next presentation in a very understandable way. What you need to know up to now for my talk is just that blockchain is a distributed ledger. It means a registry where you can put information, you can put document, you can annotate transactions. Unfortunately, you cannot see the arrows in the slide while I see it in the monitor. Anyway, the current approach, for example, in a banking system, is that you have a centralized, trusted authority which clears all the transactions. And this approach requires trust in an entity, requires computational power in a single entity. It means that someone has all the knowledge and the other people possibly doesn't, while a distributed approach means that the same information is replicated on a series of nodes. No one has a control on what is written on this registry, but the control is shared by the consensus of all the entities participating in the network. And by the magic of crypto technologies, this is possible and scales all around the world, creating phenomena like the Bitcoin, which is an example of instrument working on a blockchain which assumes this billion of dollars value. And this blockchain, this distributed ledger, falsifies the part that say that nothing is written in stone. Instead, what is written in the blockchain, and this is why it is so valuable, is written in stone, even if a virtual stone all around the world in the nodes composing the blockchain. While internet is the place where you put a thing, change thing, and is completely unstable and dynamic, the blockchain allows you to put information, keep them open and checkable by everyone. Okay? But it is more than a distributed ledger allowing cryptocurrencies like Bitcoin. It is going beyond this toward what is called smart contract in the last years. So this new technological change where the entries in the registry are not just transaction, I'm paying 1 Bitcoin to Leonardo, so I have 1 Bitcoin less, he has 1 Bitcoin more, but they are programs with a complex behavior. And this will bring us in a new area where we have an internet of money or internet of value after the Internet of Things, the Internet of Persons. The new scenario will be the one where on a browser, like the internet browser, or better call it wallet, using this monetary metaphor, on your mobile, where you will not only have your Bitcoins, Ether, or whatever other cryptocurrency, but you will have more complex, let's say, financial instruments, but also beyond, coupons, loyalty points, other kinds of incentives, sharing tokens for sharing tools that are, for example, shared in a commons, voting right in the commons, authorization to access your own data, because the data are stored in the registry, maybe in encrypted form if you don't want that everyone knows it, but you can decide information for information, thanks to the smart contract, who can access your data and why. It allows transactions among Internet of Things devices and so on. And many more. Many things are still to be invented. What are the advantages of blockchain for the social good? Okay? Probably are clear the advantages in the financial world or in the logistic world where most of the efforts are directed. Well, it creates a further level on the internet stack, a negotiation level, increasing trust. It is a book written in stone. Decentralizing things, with the advantages mentioned by Fabrizio Sestini. You don't have any more intermediaries. It allows smart contracts, as we said. It allows transparency, scalability. As we said, the blockchain, for example, the one of Bitcoin, is all around the world. It allows data to be distributed, because part of the technologies behind the blockchains come from the peer-to-peer approach for distributing multimedia content and files. It is open to every agent who wants to put a smart contract. It enables economies of scale and network effect. It impacts data ownership, and it is accessible by everyone as a common good. So example for social good, there are many. I mentioned some of them, maybe not all of them also successful. For example, he brought back the idea of mutual funds, of people helping each other, putting money in a sort of health insurance for freelancers, as happened in the Netherlands. You can rethink the sharing economy in a distributed, decentralized way, avoiding hubs like Uber, Airbnb, and so on. You can also share smaller things like bikes or a 3D printer via these sharing tokens I was mentioned. You can create land registry which are trusted. As you know, in many African countries, there is a problem of land grabbing. Since no one knows who is the land of, property of, it is a problem. But the blockchain writes into stone who is the owner of the land. Then we have more esoteric things like the DAO, the Distributed Autonomous Organization, the so-called stateless enterprise. Thanks to the smart contract, you can code inside the contract the rules of the enterprise, but you can put it where? Nowhere, everywhere, while now the concept of enterprise depends on the law of the state. So even more with BitNation, you can think of a countryless nation, a nation with its own rules coded, or constitution coded in the smart contract distributed on the blockchain, but without reference of a particular country, and so on, so forth. So I end here, I make some advertising. The blockchain is also a huge commercial success. It's created a lot of jobs, especially for computer scientists, so they are difficult to find. We are part of the Enterprise Ethereum Alliance, and it is a project, as I said, for the social good, connecting with the territory and with other projects of University of Torino, like First Life, which is a local social network. Yes, I ended the time, right? Okay.
Okay. So, thanks a lot. Please take a seat here. So I'll invite on stage the second speaker, Andrea Bracciali, is lecturer in computer science at the University of Stirling. So
I think I need this one.
Okay. So deep dive into the blockchain will continue.
Okay. Thank you for the invitation. I'm very glad to be here. And if you can move on to my slides. So, this is a very high-level journey into the idea of blockchains. What I want to do is to give you really the intuition behind. Maybe we can discuss more later on.
These are my slides, sorry, for the next part. Okay. You spoiled my presentation.
Okay. So, okay, I drive now. Okay, so this is a journey in 4 steps. YAP, blockchains, do not resuscitate, and questions, okay? Mainly for you. So, okay, you can't see this very well, but this is a map of the world, and YAP is this island in the middle of the Pacific. Is quite isolated. There is another nice island nearby, 600 miles, which has a cave of limestone. And people were sailing about 400 or 500 years ago, a difficult journey, to get some stones and bring them back to this island, which is Yap, it's very small, and use them as a coin. This is one example. This is in Canada. You can imagine that these coins have some problems because at least they are very heavy, so 200 stones each, more or less. So they were much in love with this kind of coins. They wanted to use it. And they solved the problem in this way. So basically, it was very difficult to move them around. So they're leaving the coins where they land in the island. Some of them are in the sea because the sail didn't go very well, but they know where they are. So complete dematerialization of the coin. And the problem has been solved by having a distributed ledger where everybody knows where the coin is, who the coin belongs to, and this knowledge, this kind of information, we are focusing on how the information is treated in this talk, is shared. So there is so you can't see it in the projection, but every inhabitant of the island knows everything about the stones and the coins. So they run the currency. And this is a very resilient way of organizing the information because everybody knows, you can ask to everybody. If someone is sick, you can ask to the next one. Of course, it requires a lot of communication. If you want to spend your coin, you have to tell everybody that the coin has been spent. It's very resilient or safe because I can try to steal, say it's mine, and the community will say, no, it's not yours. It's very open. You can imagine you can't evade taxes in this way, for instance. This is the opposite way. This is the bank, decentralization. There is only one person that knows everything about the coins. It's very, if you want, controllable, for some respects efficient, but it's critical because if the people dies or he or she is not honest, you can imagine all the usual problems we may have in a system like this. So this is essentially the idea of a distributed source of information, which is the blockchain. There are no people, there are computers that run this kind of, maintain alive this kind of knowledge base. Of course, you need somehow to pay them, so there is an issue of incentives, why those computers should do this. Sometimes it's very expensive. It's replicated, so every node has the whole information organized in blocks, so it's called blockchain because you write the history. If you think in terms of bitcoins, these are transactions, but could be any kind of history that you may be interested in recording. And basically, this is the abstraction. Okay, the top is the implementation. This is the idea. The difficult part, of course, is how to write the next block. So how to update the information. What Bitcoin has done, Bitcoin has been the first one, is to create a difficult but safe mechanism to decide who is the next node that writes the next part of the history. And then this next part of the history is distributed to the whole network and accepted, verified by everybody. Okay, so this is quite difficult. I won't go into the details of this. You can, there are many websites where you can see almost everything. The information is public. If you want to see, okay, you don't want to see this actually. These are transactions. Everything is available. This is movements of bitcoins from some addresses to others, publicly available on the web. So this is the framework. I'm trying to recap the idea. This is the implementation. Bitcoin was the first application. It is not the only one. It's not possibly not even the only that is interesting. There are many others that are being developed that are as interesting as. Of course, there's much more. So, for instance, I haven't said anything about the mechanism, the machinery that makes this possible, mainly based on cryptography. There will be a very interesting talk later on about cryptography. I haven't said much about this idea of incentivizing people to take part in the game, which is very important. I mean, if there is no interest, no computer will devote computational power to this thing, and we will not have the blockchain alive. And many other things we can discuss later on. So I want to come to the last slide, basically. This is an example, a case that I've come across by chance, appeared on the New England Journal of Medicine. So there was a patient in an emergency room that arrived in need, critical life conditions, and he had this tattoo, "Do not resuscitate." So in some countries, this is a legally binding order, so people may decide a decision that is legally enforced not to be resuscitated in case. This, for instance, if you are at the end of the life. And there has been an ethical case because, of course, there was a tension between the work of the doctor, the mission of the doctor, and the will of the individual. And much was about the quality of this piece of information. So was it real? Was it a game? Was it recent? Was it updated? So imagine that instead of this, you have a QR code, and the doctor in almost real time can scan it, connect to the blockchain, which is everywhere available, which is trusted, certified information. And for instance, there could be a way of keeping this information up to date. So the doctor could know that this will is by yesterday, okay? So this is the kind of enabling treatment of information that the blockchain could do. This is, in my opinion, the game changer. And of course, it's up to us to find nice way to use this new idea of treatment of information. So there are many other things. I ideally would like to leave this slide for a couple of minutes here. So we can discuss many other things. The one in red are the ones that more or less interest me much from the research viewpoint. But we need to understand how this consensus works, how we decide the next people that will write the history for everybody. What is the incentive games? I haven't said much about programs that run on the blockchain. So you can save data, but you know that in computer science, data are also programs. So you can have something that is executed on the blockchain and run as a decentralized program. What about the correctness? What about the governance? So this is open. You may want to think a bit about which one of these topics can be of interest for you. Thank you.
Thank you, Andrea. So please take a seat close to Guido. Now I call on stage Marcella Atzori, who is a blockchain advisor and GovTech expert. So she will introduce us to a particular also architecture as regards the trusted chain in the blockchain field.
Thank you very much. I'm not sure if this is working, but probably this is, so I will use this one. Hi, everyone, and thank you for having me here today. Today I'm going to introduce you TrustedChain, which is a special ecosystem specifically designed for public administration and e-government. We will see what it is, how it works, and some of its main applications. So let's start by saying that public administration, by its own nature, generates a big amount of highly sensitive data. And such data must be managed with great care because the rights of millions and millions of citizens depends on them. So if we want to deploy the blockchain to manage this data, we have to fulfill at least 4 basic conditions: high technical performance, continuity of service of the platform that hosts this data, long-term preservation of data, and low compliance, with particular regard to privacy, confidentiality of transactions, but also right to erasure. So, unfortunately, not all the blockchain networks are able to fulfill these conditions. And especially open networks, such as Bitcoin and all its clones, can be particularly controversial in this sense. First of all, because they are multi-purpose networks. They are not specifically streamlined for the purpose of the public administration. They are often based on speculative tokens. That means that data can be exposed to volatility in the long run. And like any other peer-to-peer technology, they are often focused on principles such as individual freedom and free market rules, which may easily conflict with the goals of the public administration. So, if we want to deploy the blockchain within the government, public administration, we should better rely on permission and networks, closed networks with a particular governance. They can be streamlined for specific purpose. And it's also important to remember that the data of the public administration should be uncoupled and keep separated from speculative tokens if we want to guarantee the persistence of this data over time. And we must also keep a strong focus on democratic governance. That means that we can only think in terms of individual freedom. We have to take into account also broader public interest. Okay? So the logic of TrustedChain follows this principle. How does it work? Well, it's quite simple. It is a permissioned network where only trust service providers are allowed as full nodes of the ecosystem. That means nodes that are able to read and to verify the transactions within the blockchain. But what is a trust service providers? In Italian, we call them conservatori accreditati. These entities are private entities, and they are, we have them all over Europe in 27 countries. They are qualified companies. They are appointed by the European governments, usually after a strict conformity assessment. And they usually manage and store documents for public administration and businesses. So they deal with services such as certified electronic signatures, electronic seals, timestamps, and so on. So the logic of TrustedChain is actually simple. If we use only trust service providers as full nodes of the blockchain, we automatically have a highly reliable and safe blockchain. Because these trust service providers are the only entities in the market who are obliged by the European law to fulfill all those 4 conditions that we saw at the beginning. Okay, they are regulated especially by the ADAS 2014 European regulation, so it's harmonized all over Europe. Let's see some application and benefits of a TrustedChain. We can use it, first of all, to re-engineer all the workflows of digital records within the public administration, so it becomes much more time and cost efficient. Also because the blockchain reduces redundant data, possibilities of errors, frauds, and so on. Most importantly, we can use it to generate a decentralized and robust identity system so citizens can have their privacy protected by design. Through the blockchain, they can finally self-manage their own identity. But we can use TrustedChain also for payments, for tax collection, for tracking public funds. So public administration finally becomes more transparent and accountable to the eyes of citizens. And we can also use the blockchain to safely cross and analyze data, also using application of artificial intelligence on the top of it. And this can improve enormously the general performance and the effectiveness of the public governance. So we believe that the trust service providers can really become fundamental to build reliable standards for the public administration and industry also at European and national level, both in terms of technical performance, in terms of legal compliance, but they can also finally provide an adequate governance model for the blockchain data that cannot rely only on free market rules. Thank you very much.
Thanks a lot, Marcella. So please take your seat. So I'll call on stage Massimiliano Sala, who is a professor and director of the Laboratory of Cryptography at the University of Trento.
Good morning. Does it work? Does it work? No? Yeah? See? Yes? Okay. So thanks for inviting me, especially for my colleagues of Turin, that I'm coming from a small university in Trento. And here, the thing. So, who am I? So, Well, I'm full professor in mathematics, more specifically in algebra cryptography. I'm the director of laboratory of cryptography at the university. I'm also involved in the Italian Association of Cryptography, the Componentes Cifris, which has more than 20 universities involved, and I'm the active director at the moment. And then we have a spin-off company in Trento, Intelligit, and I'm the head of the area cybersecurity and cryptography there. So, okay, so cryptography. Why cryptography? Well, when you think of cryptography, you think of Enigma, you think of wars and this stuff. Yeah, that's true. But it's not only that. Especially now, there are an amazing number of applications of cryptography. You can protect the files in your smartphones. They are protected with cryptography, whether you know it or not. And you can have communication over the internet, preserving the privacy. And you can share things like photos, and that securely, again, with cryptography. But the last and most impressive application is blockchain technology, which is the reason why I'm here. Okay. So my professor, I might be a bit more boring than the other presentation, but let's see. What is a blockchain? When I explain blockchain to my students, I say a blockchain is a huge blackboard where people write and people read. Everybody can read, everybody can write, but there is cryptography at work. First, we know who is writing. We know the digital identity of the writer thanks to what we call a public key. So we know who wrote. Then it's impossible to alter the content thanks to what we call hash function. So we know what was written. And finally, it's public. Cryptography allows blockchain to be public without losing security. So everybody can read the blackboard and trust what's written there. So these are the three main properties for a blockchain. Okay, now the first applications, as Andrea said, they are financial applications, Bitcoin, and these things, which are okay. But can we go beyond that? So, for example, what about rights? So you've been granted a right. You've been granted parking place for your town. But it could be something more serious, as Marcella said. Your right to vote, your right to health care, your right to paint your door red, whatever. You're granted a right. Okay, you park your car, then you come back, and surprise, you got a fine. Hey, but the parking permit, why got a fine? You've been denied your right. What went wrong? Okay. Well, many things may have happened. You don't know, you got a fine. First, the policeman could not see your parking permit. So you got a fine. Or the policeman did see your permit, but he thought it was fake. You know, you done yourself your park permit put there. So you got a fine. Or the policeman did see your permit. It was a real one. Problem is, it wasn't the permit of your car, or another car that you put there. That's what he thought. So you got a fine. But you knew that you had a right to park there, so the fine is something that annoys you. Can we solve this? Well, we have cryptography, we have blockchain. Imagine that you put your permit in the blockchain, then the policeman will see it because it's public, it's there in the blockchain. The policeman will be sure that it's real, not fake, because everything which is written on the blockchain is cryptographically signed. And the policeman will be sure that it refers to your car because it's impossible to change the content of what is written on the blockchain. So there is no way the policeman will give you a fine if your permit is there in the blockchain. Now, this is just a permit. It could be your right to vote, your right to social care, everything much more substantial. And okay, I've been very brief description, but many things have been already said. I would like to conclude with two things. First, so if you, anytime a right is granted to someone, it could be put on a blockchain, okay? So nobody would deny your right, except with malice. So the policeman could know you and not like you and give you a fine anyway. So the human factor will always be there. So that's a problem. And so that's a problem. And I would like to conclude by citing Polybius. Well, Polybius is wrote the Historia, which is the oldest recorded writing of someone describing an encoding system. So Polybius was working on codes at the time. And what he writes many things which are very interesting. They are studied now, currently now. I like this sentence. So he was studying the Roman army, and he described how the Romans conquered the world, or were going to conquer the world. And he said, the order of battle used by the Roman army is very difficult to break through. Why? Because it allows every man to fight both individually and collectively. The single soldier is strength and can fight from what he can do, and all together they can fight in a different way. And so if you let the individual do something that they are very good at what they're doing, but you organize them collectively, the result is impressive and could destroy any other armies in the time. Thank you.
So, thank you very much. You also take your seat. So thank you to all. Now we'll start a kind of discussion, so going to go a bit deeper on what you say. So we learned that the blockchain is this distributed ledger. So actually it's a data structures which is built through a consensus mechanism based on cryptography system and can be applied in several fields already today. So I will scramble the order. I would like to address Andrea first and to go a bit deeper about the consensus mechanism or alternatives that could be there and how they can guarantee, let's say, I would say the democratic participation to this distributed ledger, okay? So you can have a proof of work, a proof of stake, whatever you can imagine in order to participate. So how much this can allow a broad or a fully democratic participation to the system, given that they might be based on intensive computing resources or the fact that you must own a stake or a relevant stake in the field, let's say. So can you elaborate and also explain what these consensus or the, let's say, the principal consensus methods are now on the blockchain?
Well, this is not a question. This is a very much condensed. So consensus. Let's start from Bitcoin. The idea of Bitcoin is that you generate trust in an untrusted world. So you don't trust anybody. And you want to be able to exchange value, coins, and you know that everybody could try to steal in any way. So this is, I would say, the most difficult context in which you can put yourself for exchanging information, coins, value, whatever. So the big effort, or the big idea, which is quite a nice idea technically, is to provide a very strong, secure mechanism to reach this consensus. So consensus means to elect the leader that will write the history. In the case of Bitcoin, it means to elect the leader that says who owns the money for the next step, the next block. So what Bitcoin does, maybe you can say something more, but creates a challenge, a difficult problem to be solved, which is a cryptographic problem, and then all the miners, all the nodes start trying to get the correct answer. The distinguished feature is that finding a solution is very difficult, showing that the solution is actually a solution is very easy. So imagine that we start all trying to find this solution. You can imagine a big number and you want to find the divisors of this big number, okay? It's difficult. Once you have them, you multiply them and you check that it is correct. And this is artificially kept difficult. So typically you solve this, the complexity of the problem adapts to the power of the network, and you solve this problem on average of every more or less 10 minutes, okay? So in order to do this, there is a big hype about how much energy is consumed to do the calculation. There is no real precise account of this, but we believe that more or less the amount of energy that is consumed is equivalent to the amount of energy consumed by Ireland or Denmark, so it's impressive. But this is because, as I said at the beginning, you are in the most difficult situation. No trust, completely open, everybody can be a next neighbor, a next node, okay? So part of the proposed solution to this is to restrict access. So instead of being in a society that is completely open, now if you want to download the code and start running a Bitcoin node, you can, but it's too open, and it is also too public. So several companies, banks, essentially, banks spend a lot of money trying to realign their accounts, okay? So sharing information would be very interesting for them. What they do, they are trying to create blockchains that are not so free. Is a club. You can admit it only if you are approved. So there is a less ambiguity, less openness. And in that case, they do a different consensus mechanism. So the one in Bitcoin is called proof of work, because you really put work, you transform work, power, electrical power, into your right to decide. In this case, you have, for the bank example, different ways that are lighter, consume less effort, less energy, and are more similar to a democratic vote, or to a way in which who has more coins decides more. Okay, so there is this tension. Blockchain is an unpermissioned network. The other one are called permission network. So you need to be allowed.
So this introduced me to ask Marcella about those permission networks. So in principle, the blockchain on permission network could sound like a contradiction, right? So in the sense that the blockchain was created, is being created in order to guarantee an open access and a distributed access. So here I would like to address whether this kind of networks could be used for for particular kind of data, as you mentioned, and to which extent they could be connected to much more open networks or blockchains.
The question you made touched a very sensitive political issue, because we have then to address the problem of openness and democracy. Sometimes we think that openness and democracies are synonymous, and it's not like this. Democracy is somehow an anti-intuitive concept, counterintuitive. To open everything to everyone can actually turn out to be quite anti-democratic, because openness doesn't mean effectiveness of access. So now we are at a very early stage of our use of the blockchain, and we have to really ask ourselves which kind of data can be used in which kind of network. The open networks like Bitcoin are fabulous because they gave us the possibility for the first time in history to make transactions without a centralized authority. But always recall that this kind of network was firstly engineered to manage financial transactions that actually need a very simple governance, okay? Peer-to-peer, It's a simple model of governance. But when I'm dealing with highly sensitive data, such as, for example, the digital identities of citizens, or the data of the public administration, or the data generated by the Internet of Things, there is a very complex technology. Well, there I might need a different kind of governance that is much more complex, because much addresses the complexity of the data that I'm using. So I have to be, first of all, open mentally, and thinking that according to the kind of data, I must choose different kind of governance. And this is a political choice in the end. You can see the blockchain as an instrument to promote, first of all, individual freedom, but this is your choice. If you wanted to run a world only based on free market rules, this is your choice. It's a political vision. I respect it, but I want to underline that it's not the only choice that we can make. There are different choices. Personally, I like to see the blockchain in a democratic way. What means to be democratic when I approach the blockchain? It means to be inclusive of many possible visions, and then I have also to understand that permissioned blockchains, closed blockchains have a sense, and I might use them according to the general benefit of society and the goals also of public administration, government, industry, and so on. So to sum up, we have to reason in terms of plurality of networks, plurality of technology, and plurality of interests.
So, Massimiliano, in this game, of course, cryptography is one of the kings, of the many kings. I mean, consensus and governance models, of course, are the decision we have to take, but cryptography could create or destroy the equilibrium in this kind of network. To which extent do you think that the advance in computing power, in computing resources, computing architectures could, let's say, democratize or restrict the access to the data, in the sense that, of course, the robustness of cryptographic solutions could create different levels of openness, right? So you could create a completely closed networks or a bit more open network, but of course you might also lower the barrier to crack the system to some extent. So to which extent do you think the cryptographic is robust and resistant as regards the future development of computing power?
Well, not an easy question. Well, certainly, so the security given by cryptography now is based on the assumptions that we don't know if they're true. The security of cryptography system is based on the claimed hardness of a mathematical problem. If someone knows how to solve the problem that is apparently hard for the others, he can do what he wants. We can't stop him. For example, not everybody knows that there are about 2 million bitcoins which are dormant, which have never been moved since their creation. So there are 30 billion euros. They are up for grab. Just break the key and get them. And that's a huge imbalance between who has knowledge and who doesn't have. On the other hand, if you assume that these problems that are commonly believed to be hard are actually hard, there are no shortcuts to them, then cryptography can become a way to democratize things and to take democratic decisions altogether, because it will guarantee our identity, it will guarantee what we have decided individually and collectively. So I think we should think positive and look at that as a way for the social good, rather than, yes, there is a group, special hackers, rogue governments, they have special knowledge. Well, it's possible, but I would say it's unlikely. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So before asking Guido a question, I invite you to think about the questions you might want to ask to these guys here. So Guido, you already engaged in some possible application in some projects with the city of Turin. So I would like to hear about what are the first experiments in the area related to the blockchain in a practical word, let's say.
We have two ongoing projects. One is called CoCity, coordinated by the municipality of Torino, together with the neighborhood houses. And it is a project on the European call called Urban Innovative Actions. It was a call of 1.5 years ago, asking for new ways, new methodologies to solve societal problems. So we focused with the municipality of Torino on experimenting new forms of social welfare to counter the effects of the financial crisis, the decrease of funding. And the idea is to promote urban commons. That is the idea to delegate to citizens the management of part of the public services concerning welfare. And this is a new model which is also innovative from the legal point of view, because the public administration has to make a tender, usually towards some association, towards some enterprise. The best one win the tender and so on. While this approach is cooperative, which is unusual for a public administration, in which you make calls for people to put together ideas and then you later make the selection, not before creating this aggregation. And then also the winners of this new kind of tenders, this group of citizens co-design together with the municipality, for example, the spaces that they are using. And then we'll create social services, innovative enterprise, or whatever they will make. We are just at the beginning. To make this system sustainable, we are proposing the use of blockchain for the social good as a sort of support to the sustainability in the following way. The idea is to create a wallet app containing smart contracts, and with this smart contract create a sort of local financial instruments. So to bring the very initial idea of the blockchain as a global finance instrument to the local level, to the territory, to involve all the actors of the territory, and in this way to internalize the positive externalities of the local economy. The idea is to have on this app several kind of tokens or smart contracts doing different things, from discount coupons, loyalty points, crowdsourcing, voting rights in the commons, and so on. Let's make a practical example, even if it is a simple one. Assuming we have a network of retailers around the commons in the peripheries of the town, accepting a token, a blockchain token, as a sort of discount coupon. So not like a full-fledged local currency, but something more lightweight. So the network of local retailers accept this token. The commons give these tokens to volunteers, to commoners, as a sort of incentive, additional income, not just a real income, obviously. And then the commoners go in the shops and redeem the token in terms of coupons. So why are talking about internalizing positive externalities? Because this system, all based on an app, you just swipe the coupons in a very natural way of interaction, allows to, for example, to provide the local shops with a method which is free to make a sort of advertisement. Instead of printing paper coupons, which are thrown away maybe, and they don't know what happens to them, you have a method which provides also to you data. You know which people, how many people is using these coupons. And in the long term, the idea is to create a wider infrastructure to collect data, which are public, about the local economy, apply artificial intelligence to it, and get new local policies. While all this information now is in the card owners, the companies owning the cards for making a transaction. So this is the general idea of the first project called CoCity, Collaborative City, the City of Commons, together with the municipality of Torino. The second one, which just started, is called Blink, is about with some enterprises in Torino, like Consoft, CSI Piemonte, the ACLI as for the engagement part. The idea is to provide an app which is a portfolio of documents for migrants. Talking with ACLI, we have seen that migrants have the problem of changing home frequently. They don't have their own history in terms of documents, and sometimes they are not much trusted because they are unknown to other people. So the idea is to give this repository, but also with two more features. The first one is to have a privacy, granularity privacy approach, that is to decide to whom give the document, which is possible since it is based on smart contract. And the other one is a web of trust approach. So we allow other people, maybe more known, using the app to digitally sign the documents of other people to provide sort of social certification to them, which is methodology used also in other kind of sector. For example, the PGP cryptographic tool, since it provides you a way to encrypt things, but gives no reference to, no clue to the identity of people. You support the signature of someone with the signature of other people. So at some point you will meet someone that you know, and this delegation of trust will work. So these are our two current projects in Torino, both of them directed toward the territory.
So thank you. So I ask you whether there are questions from the audience. Yes, please. So please be concise both in the question and in the answer. So.
So far you focused mostly on advantages of blockchain technologies, but both consensus and cryptography are known to be computationally difficult problems. Right? So the question is, what are the limitations, scalability limitations of technology? And also, I don't know, more generally, what do you think blockchains are not good for? Are they kind of holy grail type of solutions, or where do you see this type of technology is not applicable or useful?
Thank you. So who wants to pick the
Andrea,
question?
credo.
You've been appointed.
So the question is, which are the drawbacks of this technology? I would like to start by saying that there is a huge hype. It's like at the beginning of the internet, they say, where everybody wanted to be there, but it was not clear why and for doing what. So it's, in a sense, overappreciated in the sense that sometimes we already have technology that works very well, like distributed databases amongst organizations that are in a kind of partnership. You don't need a blockchain. You need a blockchain when you want to have access to information, say, globally, in a trusted way. Think to the example of the do not resuscitate. Information which is certified. Okay. So the drawbacks are many. It depends on which angle you want to see it. Technically, it's a very complex system. So, for instance, miners, in the case of Bitcoin, do what they do because they have a revenue. This system, in my opinion, cannot be studied if you don't embed what is called crypto economics. So if you don't understand why people do things. There are some research papers that shows that, for instance, now a block is about 12 Bitcoin worth, okay? Imagine that you make a price that requires computational cost for 20 Bitcoin, which is not much. All the miners should start working on your price because it's more convenient, and the network would collapse. Okay, so technically it's a system that we are developing. We haven't understood very much. And we need, probably that there will be revisions and updates, but there are criticalities that are known. I don't know if you want to add something from the social or legal. I mean, there are many things that needs to be adjusted financially as well. So, for instance, in Bitcoins, if you create a currency like Bitcoin, you can't have, in the case of Bitcoin, a monetary policy. So the choice in the case of Bitcoin was to limit the amount of money to avoid inflation. This is bringing to the fact that Bitcoin is increasing in value. And if you reach the deflation, so you have a coin, you don't want to spend it because tomorrow will be twice as much. Nobody does any more transaction. The miners do not get revenue, and the network collapses, and your Bitcoin doesn't. So we are still understanding this kind of technical.
Just add a small comment to what Andrea said. Always recall that the blockchain should never seen as a goal per se. Okay, so it's a tool, and we always have to be concerned about the interest of all the stakeholders involved, and carefully evaluate any possible application. Under anthropological point of view also, if I may say, since I'm probably the only humanistic scholar on this stage, because sometimes computer scientists freak out a bit and talk in terms of application that probably don't work under anthropological point of view. So we have to be concerned about the fact that algorithms are always very deterministic, but human beings are not. And when we are dealing with a human factor, we are dealing with a fantastic, fabulous machine, very complex, and such complexity have to be carefully considered.
Yeah, if I can answer, well, the scalability is a huge issue. I agree with that. I don't see how they can solve it. So if, at the end of the day, what we have is a decentralized computation that allows the proof of work. And it's obvious that any decentralized computation will always be very, very inefficient compared to a centralized compilation. So that's something that you can't avoid. You have to pay a price. If you want democratic decision, decentralizations, then you have to spend money, spend energy. So I don't see how they can solve the scalability issue now. I don't see any way out. I hope someone will come out with some good ideas.
Okay. I see a less technical criticality, and that is that the blockchain, and in particular the smart contract version, amplifies the illusion that code is law, that the regulations can be reduced to programs. Take the decentralized autonomous organization approach of the countryless nation approach, where the constitution is coded in the smart contract. It is a pure illusion, because law regulations work completely different. They cannot be exhaustive, they cannot be automated, they are based on interpretation of new facts or unforeseeable facts. So already computer science has this kind of tendency to identify code with law, but
virtual judge. You know?
Yes, that was an extreme case, but there are two quite different words and not yet compatible one to each other.
Okay, time for one more brief questions and brief answers, please. Okay, over there.
Scusa, c'è quel ragazzo che...
Okay. One there. So if you are brief, we have time for the two questions. So go ahead. Yeah, sorry, didn't see.
Thanks. So my point, the point of my question is about the evolution of technology. So technology is moving fast, and you have cryptographic algorithms that become weak and need a replacement with a new one. You have proof of work that is energetic, inefficient, and you need proof of stake and so on. And so you need to adapt the technology to what's coming next all the time. And this is easy when you have one single database. You plan an upgrade, you do it in one point. It's something you can do easily. But when you have a distributed system, especially in a democratic arrangement, you need the coordination of all the stakeholders. They have to agree on what you want to do, and they have to do it all at once. And what is the way to manage this in a reasonably agile way?
Okay, so please take the other question over there. So, and then we answer. Is there a mic? Sorry.
Okay. Working?
Here?
No? Can you hear me?
In front, yeah.
Thank you. My name is Luca Boldrino for InfoCert, which is a trust service provider in the sense mentioned by Marcella and a speed identity provider. My question is more related to the usage of blockchain for identity, as was already mentioned from some of the panelists, and especially to what was now called self-sovereign identity, which is something which is looks quite an important phenomenon. The question is, how do you see the relationship between self-sovereign identity, which is possibly blockchain-based, possibly permission blockchain-based or not, and national identity systems? Can it be conceived somehow as a transnational identity system? Another related thing, I liked the example presented on the YAP money, which gives the idea that money in that case was strictly related to identities. So people knew whose coin was that. Now in our world we have the impression that money is anonymous, while identity is somehow can be known. Do you see some possible bridge between these two areas? Thank you.
Okay, so just because you have to, please, the mic over there, there was a question, then I ask you to be very brief, so think about who wants to pick the question about coordination, identity,
yes.
and then...
Good morning, it's very brief. My question is about cryptography. I think that to simulate a safe box is different from simulating a mine. How many kind of cryptographic objects we could have?
Okay, so who wants to start on the first question? It's about the coordination method, so please very, very brief, like a tweet.
Very, very briefly, about coordination in blockchain. So the model we have at the moment is the original one. It's 10 years old, okay? It's a complex construction under, as I said before, very strong constraints. There are under development different models. There is one by Silvio Micali. Silvio Micali is a quite famous cryptographer, Turing Prize and so on and so forth, who has, is developing, if you are interested, you can search for this, a new consensus algorithm where you have a restricted number of people within the community that are selected by chance, randomly. They know that they are selected. Nobody else knows who they are. And in a protocol that is 7, 9 steps, I don't remember, they reach consensus. They are not the same at each step. So it's very difficult to interfere. You don't know who is taking decisions, but decisions are very democratic because it's random, basically. And this model doesn't cost any energy. Up to the point that he says we don't need incentives. This can be done as a social service to the community. You leave your computer and the time that is not used, you maintain a blockchain. So it's a very new, there are problems, it's a very new technology. The best exercise is to to think in terms of 10, 15, 20 and more years about possible development. Think of the internet, what was at the beginning.
Okay, so the second one was on the identity.
About the problem of identity, very briefly, I have to say this is one of the most important problems at the political level and one of the most delicate data that we may deal with. The problem of, to say that I am the person that I am is directly related to the concept of citizenship, for example, in the case of public administration and government. So it must be treated with great care. That means that we have to deal with data through permissioned blockchains that have to be aligned to a democratic governance that is universal suffrage. So we are talking about institutional permissioned networks because they are the only one who can really address the problem under political point of view. So this is very important because once again we are back to the problem of democratic governance. That doesn't mean openness necessarily or not only, but in this case means most of all protections of rights. It's a very complicated issue. I can't summarize in 30 seconds, but this is something that have to be addressed.
So, last but not least, about the cryptography.
I'm not sure to understand the question. So the question is how mining works? No. Simulate.
By cryptography. So if I am a miner, I have to overcome a cryptographic barrier, isn't it?
Okay. So to do mining, you need to solve, yes, a cryptographic, a mathematical equation, yes?
Yeah. Instead, if I have to open a safe box, the process is different.
Yes.
As to, there could be gold in a safe box and also in a mine. But in a safe box, I have to find the event, the combination, which is able to open the box.
Yes.
Instead, in the mine, it is a question of a process. And the logics is different, no?
Well, not really, in the sense that mining, the way they solve the equation is just by trying all possible solutions until they find the right one. So it's just the same old know the code to open way, just do it giga hashes per second, but that's what they do. There is no miner that use a clever way to solve the equation. They just try all possible solutions until they find the right one. That's how it works.